Recognition, is that Sandy? Is that yours?
Thank you. The College Board Advanced Placement Program offers several AP Scholar Awards to recognize high school students who have demonstrated college-level achievement through AP courses and exams. Notification about AP Scholar Awards are sent to students by email and are added to students' online score reports. This year, we're excited to announce that we have 176 scholars. 2016, 166, 2015, 128. So we continue to really keep expanding our AP program. The first we're going to look at is the level of AP Scholar that's granted to students who receive scores of 3 or higher on 3 or more AP exams, and we have 73 students. Next, the AP Scholar with Honor, granted to students who receive an average score of at least 3.25 on all AP exams taken, and scores of 3 or higher on 4 or more of these exams, and there are 32 students at that level. Then AP Scholar with Distinction, granted to students who receive an average score of at least 3.5 on all AP exams taken, and scores of 3 or higher on 5 or more of these exams. So you can tell when we get to this level, we're talking most of these students are seniors. They were seniors last year and graduated in last June. There are 71 students. Then the National AP Scholar, granted to students in the United States who receive an average score of at least 4 on all AP exams taken, and scores of 4 or higher on 8 or more of these exams. And we have this year 13 students. That's amazing. And for the first time, we have a National International Diploma, and that's granted to students who receive scores of 3 or higher on 5 or more AP exams, 3 or more subject areas. And to be more specific, it tells you that there's certain content areas, so they have to have 2 AP exams from 2 world languages and culture courses. Then they need to have 1 AP exam offering a global perspective, such as something like human geography, macroeconomics, or world history. Then 1 AP exam from either the sciences, math or computer science, and then 1 additional AP exam, but it can't be in English or world language. It can't repeat that piece. So again, we have 1 student that now earned a National International Diploma. So we're very proud of our students once again in their honors with advanced placement. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, and congratulations to all the students on the list. Is there any request to speak by citizens? All right, hearing none, move on to superintendent reports and turn over to Dr. Ouellette. You can attack them on whichever order you want.
Absolutely, thank you. So start off with the construction update. And we talked a couple weeks ago. Start with the middle school. We're winding down. Hope to have some closeout documents as far as cost and final change orders and things like that here in the next month or so. Tim will be working with Kraus Anderson to get those things done. Still waiting on the lockers for Old Merlin and Old Excalibur. Those haven't come in yet, but we anticipate that'll be sometime in the next 2 weeks. At the high school site, things are moving along well. We've had several events in the new stadium that have gone very well. We have the issue with the track. As of right now, it's not the right color. And then there's also some uniformity issues that need to be rectified. We're working with the contractor. They believe they'll have that done by the 22nd of September, which is about 10 days from now. We're working with them to get those things rectified and finalized. The high school building, we're working through a new phasing plan as with Kraus Anderson and Bray. They will be at the September 25th board work session to kind of go through what is our current state at the high school, what's the best way to attack the remaining part of the project, and just kind of where we're sitting with everything. So both John Hunick from Kraus Anderson and then Matt Wolford from Bray will be here to update the board on where we're at with things, and then also answer any questions the board may have of either of those two companies. The other thing that's kind of interesting with the high school site, if you haven't had a chance to go by, the steel is coming out of the ground for the new addition. So They have the steel set for the new commons area, the new roof joist set for the existing media center area, and then they've already started coming down that main locker bay area, that 2 stories of steel set there. So we would anticipate that you may even start to see some of the outside walls going up within a month or so. So it's really coming along quite quickly as far as the new addition, and we're working through those items. The next thing on my update, because we'll have a more extended construction update on the 25th, but the next thing is the stadium usage. We've had some folks that have reached out, I think either to board members or myself, about concerns as it relates to the sound or the lights and things along those lines. We've worked to try to rectify that to the best of our ability. We're working with both our sound designers, our electrical engineers, and construction managers to try to get those things rectified. One of the things that we know is we're not going to be able to probably solve everybody's issue, and that's just the nature of the project. One of the things we told people through the referendum process and through the community information process was we feel really good about lighting, being able to control lighting, and I think most people have been very happy with that. But sound is really hard, because once you start projecting sound out, it kind of wants to go in a lot of different places. So we're trying to be as good a neighbors as we can be. We know that in some people's eyes we're falling short, but we are doing everything we can. It may get to a point where it's just, this is the best we can do with the stadium sound-wise, and we'll have to kind of figure some things out. But I want people to know that their concerns don't fall on deaf ears, that we have been making adjustments and redirecting speakers and adjusting the sound and doing all those different components as well. We have had some really neat events. The open house was Saturday night. It was very well attended, considering the stadium's been open for about 3 weeks. We had, I would say, somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 people at the event, so it was really nice. A lot of parents stayed with their little kids to put blankets out on the turf and watch the movie and that we had there, and we had great performances by our band and the Raidaires and things along those lines. So it was a lot of fun. The state convention, the last thing I have on my list is there's a link to the state convention. Just want to plant a bug in people's ears. It's January 17th through the 19th. It is in Milwaukee, as it is every year. But just as a heads up, the district has been selected to present at 2 different breakout sessions for the state convention. Our one breakout session will be titled "Your Referendum Captured Their Attention. Now Keep Them Engaged," and that's primarily talking about how we've continued the engagement process even after passing the referendum. How do we communicate with our patrons? How do we keep people in the loop as to what's going on? And then our other presentation that we'll be having is investing in human capital, implementing strategic compensation for teachers and administrators. So primarily talking about our TSS structure and our administrative compensation structure as well, and just what we're doing as a district in Hudson. So last year we presented on community engagement, and we had really a full room, so it was a lot of fun. I think we had probably 50 to 100 people that came and listened to that. So if you're wanting to attend that, just let Tim Miner know, and we will make sure that we get you registered for the conference and a room for down there. So,
Any questions from board members? Hearing none, then we move on to reports, district goals for 2016-17.
absolutely. So I'm going to turn this over to the individual directors as they go through their areas of goals. So this would be the kind of the summary report of how we ended the year 16 and 17 as it pertains to our district goals. Some of these should look familiar. I went through some of this with my evaluation that was in closed session, but wanted to make sure we did highlight these things also in open session so that everybody could see some of the great things that we have going on in the district. And then I think what we'll want to do is we'll go through the report out on the 16 and 17 goals, and then prior to moving into the presenting on the 17-18 goals, I guess what I would ask is that you would move one of our action items up, which would be the proposed 17-18 budget, because I want to make sure that gets done and approved prior to the annual meeting that we have, because if we end up taking a recess at about 6:30, we have to make sure that item gets taken care of at this meeting prior to the annual meeting. So after the 16-17 goals, we would move to that proposed budget and then see where we're at time-wise, and then move on to the 17-18 goals.
Very good. All right.
Alrighty, thank you very much. I'll start out with the advancement of HSD 2025 and the long-term implementation plan that we put in place last year. Most of the work under this category represents the work of student services and the teaching and learning department. I'm just going to go quickly through this again. Most of this you've seen and actually hear a little bit about it later at the annual meeting, I do believe, as well. So the first area was data-driven decision-making. Next area, technology integration. The technology integration focused primarily on furthering the advancement of our one-to-one initiative, advancing our work with Google and our partnership with Google, and then personalized professional development, making sure teachers not only knew how to use the technology on a technical standpoint, but also how to maximize student learning. Standards-based grading, we kicked off that initiative, and Sandy did a lot of great work with that. And then the academic career plan. In terms of the evidence and the accomplishments, I just want to highlight a few that I think are worth noting. Developed the new technology council with parent representation from all levels. This was a pretty big deal, and Jennifer Lotzi, our Assistant Director of Teaching and Learning for Technology, did an amazing job of getting student or parent representation, actually, and student representation across all levels to engage in deep and meaningful conversations about technology integration. In the past, that there has been a group, but it was sort of a static group that really didn't get involved in the nitty-gritty. It's an incredibly engaged parent group. In fact, they're going to sort of a field trip to River Falls, and they're not presenting, they'll be at a presentation on internet safety. So that was a great accomplishment. And then moving on to developing a plan for standards-based grading with K-5 Mathematics Committee as part of the program review process. I highlight this. You're also going to hear many of these goals when we get to the 2017-18 that have been expanded or extended. And then I also wanted to highlight the ACP, the Academic Career Plan, which you've heard about before, but a few areas that I think are very important, represents a partnership between teaching and learning and student services. So putting together the steering committee and then creating a long-term plan. I'll leave it at that. There's more there, obviously, you can read.
I will cover the connecting with community. The first point is about providing timely information and opportunities regarding our construction projects. The evidence listed here, so we did put out a monthly Raider recap, and that was put on the website in Thursday folders and shared through social media. So those were updates to the community about what was going on with both of our construction projects. We also held 5 community meetings between last year, August, and April of this year. We did purposefully send out hard copy invitations to neighbors surrounding the high school so they were aware of the meetings and could attend those meetings. We also had direct communications to families describing changes on the site. So especially the high school when things got a little bit more complicated. So letting them know how traffic would change when parking was changing. So we would use our Blackboard Connect, which most people know about as our emergency messaging system, but we also use that as an outreach method. The second point that we cover in connecting with community is to continue to grow public trust and confidence through open, honest, and frequent communication with all stakeholders. We distributed a quarterly newsletter. This is the second full year of sending out the newsletter. We've had very positive response, and we use the newsletter not only to inform people about the construction, but also just the good things that are going on in the school district, and also to provide folks with information about connections, email, so that if they have questions, if they have concerns, that they use that. And this year we've had lots of folks who have taken advantage of that connections email to get answers to specific questions or to raise concerns. So on a weekly basis, I probably have 3 folks who connect through that, which is, it's a convenient way for folks to connect. And then we'll continue to look at other methods for folks to use as we move forward.
then I'll discuss the investment in human capital component. And so as you guys are very aware, we continue to advance the implementation of the multi-year strategic compensation plan, which includes in part the teacher salary structure continued implementation. I would say the focus in terms of the 16-17 school year was certainly communication when it comes to TSS. Continued communication, whether it's meetings, whether it's the expansion of the TSS committee overall, or it's the opportunity to have feedback in multiple forums so that we continue to analyze the structure as we go forward, as we discussed at the last work session. So that's a continuing goal, but also one that we focused on in 16-17. In addition to that, in terms of the Hudson Lead component of the administrator performance, pay for performance system, we reviewed the systems and developed a system. I think the official name is Hudson Lead Salary Structure, HLSS. And so we had implemented it last year, so we developed it and implemented it completely in 2016-17. And so now we're starting the second year of the implementation there. So that was the investment in human capital. We also created an organizational flow chart, something that wasn't comprehensive in nature prior to the 16-17 school year. It is now a comprehensive document, as well as we have flow charts and a document, essentially a comprehensive document that has every single employee in the district described in terms of their FTE, their roles, title, cleanup, and all of those items, where we have a much better, more comprehensive view of our structure top to bottom. And as a result of that information, we're now working on developing recommendations going forward in terms of modifications, some of which have already been implemented for the 17-18 school year, such as the name title changes for several positions. The last piece would be the board policy project. We're also starting year 2 of this project. Year 1, we focused on developing a review schedule, as well as renumbering comprehensively the entire all the board policies to align with WASB that allows for better updating going forward, more consistent updating, and comparison with others that utilize WASB as well. And then we accomplished the complete review, revision, analysis of the 100 series as well as the 200 series, and are in the process of doing the 800 series at this point in terms of the communication. So that's the status for 2016-17.
Okay, under finance and operations, we continue the development of multi-year plan for the long-term district-wide facilities. So we went through and we selected a firm, Krauss Anderson, of course. We held planning meetings. We did a staff survey. We did interviews for principals, department heads, and administration. And then you received the draft of that report and gave some feedback on that report. So next steps, I'll be going to the board work session to continue to work on the overall direction for that plan. We also looked at, in collaboration with Human Resources, we did some improvements to our reporting capabilities through our employee management system. So we looked at employee tracking and some of the information that's coming out of that program and trying to really improve what we're getting out of the program so it's more useful to us. We also did a little bit deeper integration of one of our time off systems, integrating that with a payroll system. So we've got a little bit better integrating that information. We did automation. We looked at automation for employee management and payroll functions related to the teacher salary structure. If you remember, that structure is very different than what we've had in the past, and so we looked at some ways to try and build some efficiency and get some automation back as far as that structure is concerned. So then one other thing we didn't put on here is we did last year the implementation of online payment systems, so accepting credit cards and other online forms of payment. So that was that's the wrap for us.
Very good. Any questions on the 16-17, which is kind of a recap of everything we've done over the last year and the 24 school board member meetings that we've had, whether work sessions or action sessions. Any other questions? Seeing none, then we'll move on to the action agenda, and we'll take things pursuant to the recommendation of the superintendent. We'll now take up the proposed budget for 17-18. Depending on time, we may be able to get the consent items done and then start on district goals, depending on where we're at.
Okay, this should be fairly quick. There aren't a lot of changes to what you saw at the last meeting. I'll just run through the major assumptions very quickly. The state aid is projected to decrease about $2 million or 8.5% over last year. Again, this is all subject to legislation, and we're hoping that's going to be decided at some point in time this month. Projected per pupil categorical aid, that's the other piece that the governor had introduced, and that would, he's got the introduction on the table of $200 per student. We're being a little bit conservative, so we're saying putting $150 in per student for that. And then we've got a 4K startup grant. If you remember, obviously you would, the funding for the construction projects, you decided to actually bond for $500,000 less based on where we are with those projects. Mill rate is at 10.28, and that's up 3.9% from last year's mill rate of 9.89. Our valuation is expected to increase about 6%, so we're going to see that valuation above the state averages again, and that's kind of a continuing story for us. The underlevy is at $8.6 million, and that is direct property tax relief. That's about as direct as you can get. Projected expenses for our 4K program, about $1.1 million. But again, the note is that is not going to increase property taxes. So we are funding that internally until the aid comes the following year. Salaries and benefits are at $2.1 million or 5%. That's everything. That's all in. So it includes health insurance and everything. And so we'll start to see that after the third and final year of implementation. We'll start to see that level off. Net expenses of about $190,000 are due to some infrastructure for technology improvements, and that's taking advantage of an E-rate funding program. So essentially, we're paying 50 cents on the dollar for any improvements there. And if I roll into the next page, that's the summary that you've seen before. And again, I won't go into a lot of detail unless someone has specific questions about it. And we're maintaining at the bottom of the page, you can see that last line, maintaining that fund balance as a percentage of expenditures at about just shy of 26%. So the board policy is 25 to 30%. And again, that provides a lot of flexibility, reduces or eliminates the need for us to cash flow borrow, which is an added expense, and also helps the bond ratings as well. And then the summary, next page is a summary of the historical valuation, levy, and a mill rate. And you can see we're up at the very bottom line in that section. We're up about 6%. That we'll have the final figures for that in October. But this one we're able to project pretty close because we look at county-wide information. And so 6% will be within a fraction of a percent when those final numbers come out. Down in the bottom section, you can see the city, you can see the taxing by district, and that's where things get a little bit different. So on average, up 5.99, but you can see town of St. Joe is up 9.22 this year, and then the town of Troy next highest at 7.58. So that town of St. Joe, again, a lot of that's speculation with the bridge being in now. That's what's driving those double-digit price increases for the last two years. Before that, it was 13% for the previous 2 years, and now it's 9.22. And again, that does affect when we go to allocate the taxes out to each municipality. It does have an effect. So St. Joe and Troy will shoulder a little bit more of that increase. The proposed budget for 17-18, that's similar to the budget publication that gets put in the paper. It's got a little more detailed breakdown, but again, it's similar to what you saw last time, and it provides a little bit more detail. But again, the same as the budget summary on the previous page, and this just breaks down and it has additional information on by fund categories. So that's, in summary, that's the budget that we'd like you to approve tonight going into the annual meeting.
All right, yeah, this is the fourth time that we've seen this since I think, May. And my question was, we've been waiting since May for the legislature to pass the budget. And now the latest news was, as of last week, I think Joint Finance had approved the $200 categorical. So if you could, Tim, what impact would that have if we were to allocate that additional $50 per student directly to property tax relief? What impact would that have on the mill rate?
Yeah, so that it would bring in another $280,000 into the district. And so if you applied that to reduce the mill rate, it would reduce the mill rate about 7 cents roughly. And so on a $100,000 home, that would be $7. $200,000 home, it would be $14.
Okay. And so that would bring the mill rate, proposed mill rate, from 1028 to 1021.
Right.
Subject to all these other assumptions, which again
That's-
can still
yeah.
change between now and October when we officially set our mill rate.
It certainly can, and the biggest one is the equalization aid. That's that large aid piece. So that one, the DPI estimate from July to what we get as a final in October can swing by 6 figures. So yeah, that one could definitely change it.
And short of the legislature taking some action to change the equalization formula and so forth, which has been incredibly complicated and frustrating over the years, is there anything our district can do to try and prevent that loss of over $2 million?
We could possibly lower our values. So if they don't go up above the state averages, then we don't lose that aid. But that's been our problem. We have some graphs that speak to that, kind of walk through that for the annual meeting, so folks get a little bit of an understanding of what's being impacted and why we're losing that state aid.
It's frustrating that the evaluation goes up 6%, but we lose 8.5% on the equalization aid.
Yeah, and that is exactly the way the formula is designed to work. So the state says more property-rich districts, taxpayers can afford to pay more, and so then they take from those districts and redistribute those aid dollars to other districts.
All right. Well, any other questions from other board members on this budget? Looks like none of the numbers have changed, including our conservative estimate of the 150, but
Right.
progress is being made down in Madison towards that 200. We're hoping that the mill rate can not go up as much as what it's currently projected. So, any other questions from board members? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Mr. President, I would move to approve the proposed budget for 2017-2018.
Second.
Right.
Call vote, please.
Sure, we can do a roll call vote. Now, see, Mr. Secretary, do you have that handy? Is that here? Yes. All right, it's behind my computer here. All right. I guess we want to do this alphabetically, so roll call vote. Brown.
Brown, aye.
Gerke.
No.
Hanson.
Aye.
Katas.
Katas, aye.
Loglin. Whitaker.
Whitaker, aye.
Johnson, aye. Motion passes. All right. Is there a motion regarding consent items? Pursuant to the language in the,
Mr. President,
yes.
move approval of the consent items and that the Director of Financial Services be authorized to pay bills in the amount of $2,314,161.78.
Second.
Motion by Whitaker, second by Brown. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes. Next up is district goals for 2017-18. And I guess, how would you want to, let's start the discussion at least, and then we'll see how far we get.
Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll kind of combine the report and the action item all as kind of one thing. So we would typically be reporting out and then later in the meeting taking action on adopting them. But since those are the last two things on the agenda before we go into closed session. So I'll go ahead and turn it over again to the directors.
I'll start. So it's a repeat in terms of the continued investment in human capital, certainly a top priority in the Human Resources Department. And so what we're doing this year is continuing the implementation of the multi-year strategic compensation plan. And as part of that, there's the TSS system, the teacher salary structure piece. There's the administrator pay for performance, which is the HLSS system. And now we're looking at the support staff potential pay-for-performance system. So what we're doing this current school year for 17-18 is we're reviewing, developing, and hopefully, ultimately, you would be adopting a new support staff compensation structure. That system would be effective with the 18-19 school year. However, there's a lot that goes into that, so we need this year to develop it. The other piece that I'll touch on would be the board policy project, and that also is a continuation per the board adopted review cycle, where we have a 5-year review cycle this year. We're continuing with the review, cleanup of the community series, that I believe it's 800 series, but then also on top of that would be the personnel policies, most of which haven't been updated since 1990. And so it is a significant project that we'll be working on this school year.
Next is continuing to connect with the community. We still have a large construction project to complete, and there's a lot of communication that needs to go along with that. So providing quarterly or as needed community mailings or meetings to inform the public as we move forward with that project, and also continuing to direct communications to staff, students, families, and neighbors regarding the day-to-day operations that impact those folks. The second bullet point there is a lengthy bullet point saying intentionally and systematically connect with our school district community in order to foster positive two-way communication and a sense of community connectedness. Build trust and improve communication between the public and the school district. Clearly, connecting with our community remains a high priority, and therefore it continues to be a primary goal of the district and presumably of the boards.
Alrighty, we'll move on to the teaching and learning side of HSD 2025, and Sandy and Aaron and I will be presenting this. Our 4 focus areas are curriculum clarity and implementation, personalized student learning, responsive professional learning, and formative assessment improvements, and that includes some improvements in our database decision making. I'll pass it over to Sandy to discuss the curriculum clarity and implementation.
We've been working very hard to review and renew our process for program review, our 6-year cycle, and we have added components now that include standards prioritization, deconstruction of those standards, and then aligned scaffolded assessments. Now that the process takes place as in the 6-year cycle, as well as pretty much weekly with our collaborative time, we want to make sure that all people understand the components that are necessary when they go through a program review so that we're all working together. Then there are 2 pieces that really are more on the communication side. One is we're going to begin working on a PK-12 curriculum document. So for example, we'll start in PK in our 4K program and talk about what happens in English language arts, and then take it all the way up through 12th grade. So it'll be, Dave's envisioning kind of a 4-fold document that would include all of those areas so you can see the growth of what occurs in each discipline K through 12, or actually 4K through 12. Then we're also working with our data warehouse, our curriculum warehouse, our build your own curriculum. We've already started to create a timeline and establish a process to ensure that all of our lessons are entered into that throughout the coming year. And then, as Dave mentioned, in 2016-17, we started with elementary math. They will be having a standards-based grading system this year, and then we will be working so that all other curricular areas are brought on board at the elementary level within the year.
In terms of supports for students in special education, we had a team of teachers work this summer in looking at different options for an Orton Gillingham-based reading curriculum, and so we're expanding that Tier 3 reading intervention options to include that this year.
If we go on to personalized learning, this will be a learning and planning year with Dave and Aaron and I. We'll be attending some professional learning for ourselves to both define personalized learning for the Hudson School District and establish a long-term plan. As you know, we had plans for academic career that were already put in place over the summer, and that's going to continue. So we'll be monitoring the implementation of the ACP, which allows students to develop their self-awareness and create a personalized academic career plan.
We also established co-teaching within one of our 4K programs this year to allow for a more inclusive setting for those kids. So we'll be continuing professional development for those teachers in that program.
Alrighty, I'll touch on responsive professional learning. This is really about maximizing our efforts with an amazing team we have of our teaching and learning coaches. Some focus a little more on technology, some more on curriculum, but it's essentially a cohesive team that works on improvements for professional learning. Professional learning, sometimes referred to as professional development, that's what our teachers access to improve their craft. And without a doubt, our coach team is the best resource we have in professional learning. What we want to do is more clearly articulate what it is they can do for teachers. Part of what they do is very, sort of the curriculum side is very mandated and it's very structured, so this is what you need to do. But on the instructional side, it's a little more invitational. We want to make sure teachers understand what they have available to them to improve their skill set. And that will also include a digital learning library. As things continue to advance, there's all sorts of great resources out there in a digital format. We want to make sure we have a tool that allows them to easily access those, and then also to sort of highlight what they do and what they've learned about. And that will be handled through that streamlining of the professional development. And then moving on to formative assessment improvements and database decision making. Formative assessment refers to the assessment that a teacher will conduct with a student that allows the teacher to adjust their instruction, as opposed to like the big end of the year test or the forward or the ACT. It's the smaller assessments that say, okay, this is how the student is performing and this tells me this is the appropriate next step. Right now we have some really solid things going on in formative assessment, but not a strong structure to say this is how formative assessment works in the Hudson School District. That's what we'll be developing. Both that as well as the database decision-making connect to a tool that we will be using called Illuminate Education, which serves as a data warehouse as well as a formative assessment repository that students can write on their device if the teacher so chooses. The teacher can push an assessment out. Teachers or students can respond. The teacher has that data right there on the spot and is able to make adjustments if needed. So we're looking forward to that, but it's a pretty big undertaking, requires a lot of people.
Mr. President,
Yes.
may I ask a question now of Dave rather than waiting, or do you want me to wait?
No, go ahead, ask the question
Okay.
now.
I'm just curious, I know that we've talked about this before, about teachers having opportunities to interact with one another to discuss what they're doing in the classroom. So is there still opportunities for them? I mean, because they're experts, and I know the curriculum's mandated, but can you say anything about the opportunities they have to share pedagogy and methodology and that kind of thing?
Yeah, you bet. So the most direct place that takes place is in their professional learning communities. All groups have their professional learning community. They meet on a regular basis. They discuss what they're doing, but primarily they do that through a lens of how are the students performing and what do we need to do instructionally to meet that next goal. I'll be honest with you, it becomes increasingly difficult with smaller groups. The smaller the group in terms of if they're what we refer to as a singleton, a teacher that only teaches like one class and there's no one else in the district that teaches, it becomes challenging, but we try to access things like our late starts to provide time for those teachers to meet with one another and collaborate.
Right. Then last but not least, Tim Erickson. And Tim, you've got several that are continuations of the 16-17, but do you have a few new ones to focus on?
Right, yeah, so we'll skip over the long-term district-wide facilities plan. We're looking at, in collaboration with Peggy Eller, looking at some alternatives for the high school food service program. What we want to do is generate some additional interest in that program. Some of the changes at the USDA level have been less than appealing to students, so we need to get to a point where we're appealing to students and keeping offering healthy alternatives, but yet things that that kids desire in the way of food. So we'll be looking at that this year. Continue to support and manage construction activities at the high school. Again, we won't go into that one. Also continuing to collaborate with human resources. A lot of that's Mark Cumlin and Holly Butler working on that. We want to continue to drive down and improve our data that we're getting out of the system. Also continuing to expand a credit card and other non-cash payment systems. Mark's been very instrumental in implementing the Square program that you see out at concessions. So we're able to take a lot of different payment forms, including Apple Pay for that. And then the last thing is Jim Stacekel and I have talked about an electronic process for work order systems. So we'll start the work of evaluating systems and looking at various software to accomplish that. And again, it should improve our tracking, improve time response to that, and selection and prioritization for work orders.
All right, very good. So with that report, is there any questions? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
Good list of goals.
I agree. I think that with all the multi-year projects that we have going in all different areas, to be adding some of these other things, I think that's a really good job, and it shows that we can walk and chew gum at the same time, but, you know, always trying to improve and finding new ways to improve and not just hashing over some of the same programs. So I really appreciate the effort that was put in on these goals. Looks like we've got an aggressive agenda and possibly some long work sessions ahead of us in the next year. So,
Mr. President,
yes.
have this on. There we go. I move that we accept the district goals for 2017-18.
Second.
All right. Motion by Katas, second by Gerke. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion is approved, and I'll entertain a motion at this time to go to closed session pursuant to the language in the statute that's cited on our agenda.
Mr. President,
Yes, Carrie.
pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, Parent 1, Parent E, and Parent F, for the purpose of contract negotiations, discussions, since competitive reasons require a closed session, and for the purpose of discussing financial histories and disciplinary data of specific persons which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data. And B, pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, Parent 1, Parent F, to consider the personal histories of specific persons which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories.
Second.
And this one also requires a roll call vote. And Brown,
Brown eye.
Gerke,
Gerke, aye.
Hanson,
Hanson, aye.
Katas,
Katasai.
Loglin,
Loglin, aye.
Whitaker,
Whitaker, aye?
Johnson, aye. The motion passes, and for information of those in the audience, will be convening to closed session and then adjourning from closed session for the regular meeting, and then we will be calling to order the annual meeting at the appointed time of 7 p.m. Thank you for coming.